But over the weekend, one of the guys that we all know here in Duval was targeted by maybe trading for him was Brandon Aiyuk. Was he not a big talking topic?
He was, yes.
And why? Because this team was in a position to where they needed to figure out how to have a deep threat and score more points, and they lost Calvin Ridley.
Yeah. Well, losing Calvin Ridley. Well, not spending the money that the Titans spent on Calvin Ridley, the reason why we lost him. But, yeah, Brandon Aiyuk was a commodity. He was a proven commodity. And the question before the draft is, should we make a move for him? What is it going to cost us to get him? And are we prepared to pay him once we get him? But we went the other direction. We went and got us Brian Thomas in the first round, and Aiyuk just became an afterthought.
Right.
So, but I'm always with the notion that you got to go with the proven commodity. Nothing against Brian Thomas, but in that situation when you got a guy who's a not perennial All-Pro, but he's ascending. Right. Should be an All-Pro. One of the maybe top, I would say top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. You've got to bring that guy. He's going to you would have been giving Trevor another weapon, or proving a weapon that could have helped him in the end. But it didn't work out that way. We went with Brian Thomas, and we're hoping the decision not to sign Calvin Ridley and not going after Aiyuk, that Brian Thomas proves us right, not wrong.
It is interesting what you just said. You said top 10. I raised
12.
I raised my eyebrow because he easily could be ascending into one of those positions, especially on the team that he's on. But that's an interesting debate.
I tell you what, he's in the room. He's not at the table.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, because, look, we know who's
who's sitting at the table.
The Justin Jeffersons.
Jamar Chase.
The Jamar Chases. You can go down the line with the Tyreeks and a few other guys that have just been really, really productive over a number of years. And this is not to say that Brandon Aiyuk hasn't been. But let's keep the conversation going, Matt, because over the weekend, he's been stumping to get out of San Francisco, has he not?
For months.
Yeah.
Months, okay? For months he's been trying to get out of San Francisco on another team. He went on TikTok with Jaden Daniels and says, they don't want me, bro. They don't want me.
Right. And set that up where it could be taped on social media so it could get out.
Right. So it's very clear what he has wanted, but now it's also very clear, and now as the calendar hits July and we're 2 or 3 weeks away from less than 3 weeks away from training camp, and it's clear now that no one's going to trade for him, or no one wants to give the Niners what they want.
Yeah, at least right now.
He's now in a situation of, all right, this is my prove-it year. Do I want to go into this year? And if I get injured, then what? Mm-hmm. So he's starting to panic a little bit. So he wants his contract. Now he's saying, I want a contract. I want to play for them. My whole thing was this, and I'm not saying that Brian Thomas Jr. is not going to be a terrific player for the Jaguars. I have no idea. I don't think any of us do. It's hope.
Right.
Right? And I always say, Joe,
right. It's not a plan.
Not a plan.
But I will say this. It's a philosophical decision by them is what it was. It was a philosophical decision for them to not give the Niners what they wanted and instead go in the draft and get a guy in the first round. My whole thing is this. If Brian Thomas is not what Calvin Ridley was or Brandon Aiyuk was, that's a problem.
It is.
That's a big problem. That's a personnel move. That is a bad decision. So, and again, we've said this over and over and over, that the idea right now is to put every piece possible around Trevor Lawrence,
right,
to give him every possible advantage to have as much success as he can to reach his ceiling and to lift the franchise higher than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. I'm not saying that Brian Thomas is not going to be a great player. Brian Thomas may go out and have 75 catches and 10 touchdowns, and great. There you go. They made the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
If he's a guy that struggles and he has 40-something catches and what the history of first-round picks and wide receivers of this franchise has been, then you start to have to look at it like, all right, that's their philosophy of what they wanted to do didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the philosophy last season of not getting an extra pass rusher. Didn't work.
Yeah, that I get. I think the biggest thing here, and I agree, the whole idea is that surround 16 with firepower, that and as much ammo as you possibly can have to attack. I get all that. But at the same time, the one thing that Shad Khan has pointed out, and correctly so, is that this team spends way too much money in free agency because they're not any good at drafting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They are forced to spend money in free agency. And this isn't just a Trent Baalke situation or Trent Baalke problem. This was a Dave Caldwell problem. This was a go back in time and a Shaq problem, certainly a Gene Smith problem. Anyway, they have spent a lot of money, the proverbial throwing money at a
Absolutely.
problem instead of drafting a guy.
More than most teams in the NFL, by the way, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that if you go and get Brandon Aiyuk, Leon, you not only give up a precious piece of draft capital, you got to pay the man instantly. And so I do get the proven commodity idea, but holy cow, man, they have got to figure out a way to succeed through the draft instead of going and buying.
That's true. And I mean, if you want Brandon Aiyuk to be, I mean, if you want Brian Thomas to be Brandon Aiyuk, I mean, you're talking about the guy 75 catches, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. Is Brian Thomas? I mean, is he that elite receiver? Because you told me that
I don't know.
You told me that the elite receivers went up in like the top 10, and Brian Thomas wasn't a stretch, but he probably went where he was supposed to.
All right, so Casey, here it is.
Right, and I'm not saying Brian Thomas is not going to be an elite receiver, but all I'm saying to you is you look at their receiving core right now. Christian Kirk, free agent. Evan Ingram, free agent. Gabe Davis, free agent. I understand the idea of like developing, but you've nailed on those 3 free agent signings right there, wide receiver. If you just trust yourself one more time with Brandon Aiyuk, then look what you've got.
Yeah, you've got an arsenal.
You've got an ascending player who has experience in the league. That's my only point. And I'm not, again, if Brian Thomas hits, that's fantastic.
Right.
It's a philosophical decision. They chose to draft instead of signing him.
I don't even think it's a philosophical. You better figure it out in the draft or you're going to be in trouble.
Now, don't get me wrong. Brian Thomas played in the big boy league. The SEC is the king.
Had a great year last year.
Had a great year last year.
And
Absolutely.
even half of 22 had a great year, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
About a year and a half.
But you got to also take in consideration the fact that Brandon Aiyuk has played big ball in big games that matter. Yeah. All right, so that carries a lot of weight.
Proven
games.
Proven commodity.
We're talking about divisional round, championship round, Super Bowl round. I mean, so he brings all that mystique, all that experience in the big, which means that in the big, when it's time to shine the most, he doesn't shrink under the pressure because he's proven. That's when we say proven commodity. We're not only talking about as far as his days in the league. We're talking about the fact that this guy has played in playoff games and played in divisional championships and Super Bowls. So when you bring that kind of experience into the locker room, man, you're done. I mean, that's all she wrote.
Yeah. And you go back and you take a look at the Christian Kirk money, and right now it seems like a bargain compared to what some of these guys are getting, but it was a 4-year, $72 million deal at the time. It was pretty dang big, and he has proven that he is a guy that they can rely on. May not be that 100% deep threat number one alpha dog, but he is a guy that absolutely has
he's earned it.
Produced.
He's absolutely
earned it. He's produced. There's no
100%.
question. Like
he's a good player.
My only point with that is that they went on top of the Christian Kirk deal, and they went and got Calvin to be that alpha dog.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they had nothing before they got any of them.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing.
Yeah.
So they had to do something.
Yeah. Well, but like you said, the year before Christian Kirk was good.
I mean, DJ Chark was their best receiver prior to that, and I don't think he's still in the league, is he?
He's bumping around. He might be with Carolina right now. But they went and got Calvin made the deal after they spent all that money on Christian Kirk. So they knew they were still trying to add to the room. What's
interesting is that what if the Jaguars, because Trevor was negotiating his contract, what if that was one of the hey, Trevor, we're going to make a move at Aiyuk, or would you willing to take a discount or not?
Well, as the numbers suggest, he was willing to help the team. Okay, he was willing to help the team, and so I do think that's a nice. Guys get criticized for not getting the max, and he still went to the top of the quarterback pay charts. But the way things were structured, it doesn't hit the salary cap as much as other contracts that are out there, and he was helping his team in some respects as far as that.
Let me just do this real quick, okay? In 2021, before they jumped in the free agency market and got Christian Kirk, their receivers were Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Laquan Treadwell.
Oh, it was awful.
Jamal Agnew, Tavon Austin, DJ Chark. They were god-awful.
It was awful with apologies to Marvin Jones Jr., because, I love Marvin, but he was the best of the bunch, and he had just barely walked into Duval County. But, oh, my gosh, yes, it was terrible. Do you know how many –
Chark got hurt the second game of the season or something?
Do you know how many 1,000-yard receivers this football team has had in the 29 years that they've been around. They're celebrating 30 years now.
Different guys, you mean? How many different guys?
Different guys.
4.
No, more than that.
More than 4?
It
6.
ain't much more,
6.
but here's the total.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have had a total of 18,000-yard seasons.
Right.
Okay? But most of them, of course, have been eaten up by the great Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardell. Anyway, the bottom line is you're talking barely 8 that have had 1,000-yard seasons receiving for this football franchise.
Who are the 8?
You could go through. Let me just pull it back up here. You have Alan Hearns,
obviously.
Allen Robinson.
Allen Robinson, right.
You have Keenan. You have Jimmy. Let me just go back and pull this up here real quick. It is just nuts how few there are that have been able to do it. I lost it here for 1 second. But that's it. 18 total seasons of productivity from that receiving game, and then just so few beyond that have been memorable. Guys that have gotten second contracts, we know how few and far between those guys are. But yeah, it's been a position of great need, and so that's why let's just get back to the Aiyuk part of this.
And by the way, they've never drafted a guy in the first round, a wide receiver, and he signed a second contract. Never.
Right. Because it was a Matt Jones, it was a Reggie Williams, it was an R.J. Soward. You can go down the line with the guys.
That's the history you're running up against right there.
Yeah, it's no bueno. And so now you're hoping that they're going to get to a point where they're investing in players and they're getting guys that will make immediate impact. And that's what they're banking on. Okay, look, you cannot guarantee any draft pick is going to pay off. You can't. You can't do that with the number 1 overall pick. You certainly can't do that with Mr. Irrelevant. But number 1 has paved a pretty good way here, and then Mr. Irrelevant's done pretty well out in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So there's no guarantee, but they need to make sure that they pay attention to one of the most important elements of this offense, which is what you said, arm Trevor with weapons. And they needed a guy that was cat quick with size that could take a defense and send them south down the field where they can open things up for the pass.
I mean, if you're spending $275 million on a cat, you're going to do everything you can to help him out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I'm going to say this again because I don't want anyone to think I'm running down Brian Thomas because I'm not. I think he could be a very good player. It's a philosophical decision by them. They decided they were going to draft. But it was weird to me that was the decision when the recent history of what these two guys have done, Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke, has been success picking free agents and put them in the passing game and watching them flourish.
Yeah.
So you've had success in grabbing these guys that were not necessarily elite guys. Christian Kirk wasn't elite. Zay Jones wasn't elite.
No.
Evan Ingram, people were saying he was out of the league in a couple years if he didn't turn it around. All 3 of those guys nailed. All 3 of them.
Yeah, they were questioning his ability to make big plays, find Pro Bowl form, be a solid tight end that didn't cough up the football, all those things. He's being second-guessed to death up there in New York. And he comes down here, holds onto the football pretty dang well, and obviously made 2 solid years. One that got him a nice deal, got him tagged, got him a nice long-term deal, and then he followed that with a pretty hefty catch schedule this past year.